Good evening. I am Joe Engel. I appreciate your time this evening. I'm here on behalf of NOAA specifically for the moral budget, and the piece that in particular I want to talk to you about is called HEALS. All of you should have received a proposal about HEALS. It's $800,000 for a response to mental crisis calls in the 911. Our system right now is very inadequate. We're sending police to respond to mental health crisis calls. What HEALS does is send two medical professionals, an EMT and a crisis intervention worker, and they respond to the mental health crisis calls. It's a medical problem. This is a medical response. That's what you need. If violence emerges, then you summon the police. Now, we looked at various models across the country. The one in Oregon, they had 24,000 calls, and out of those 24,000 mental health crisis calls, they only needed to summon the police 175 times. You do not need the police as a first response in a mental health call. We look at Denver, where their STAR, thank you. You look at Denver, where their STAR program is, and they just launched that, and they are now getting refunded at a higher level from their council because they had 857 mental health crisis calls, no need to call police to any of them. That's where we are in Nashville, and it's heartbreaking when members of our congregations in NOAA call 911 for a mental health crisis, and what ends up happening is their loved one gets taken to jail rather than getting the mental health they need. Please look at our proposal. Please move HEALS into the budget. We're here to talk to you about it. You can call us, and thank you very much for your support.
All right, thank you, Mr. Engel.
My name is Sean Witzel. I live in the 37209 area. I'm here because I stand in solidarity with the people, and I think we need a budget. I know we need a budget that reflects what the people want. I received a call last week from my cousin who was distraught because someone in her neighbor was experiencing a mental health issue, and she did not want to call the police. So she called me. She called other people in this room because she knew that we could help in some way. And the police ended up there, but they weren't comfortable with the police being there. And the issue with that is that there weren't any other options for them they didn't have any other options. So I believe the best form of public safety is investing resources, equity, and to erase the disparities that are in this city. Nashville needs a moral budget. That budget includes the HEALS model, where instead of sending police to answer these calls, we send a medic and a mental health expert. And we know the MNPD is moving forward with the co-response model. So on behalf of NOAA, where I'm a part of the Criminal Justice Task Force, I'm asking us to invest in the HEALS model so that we can have a pilot program in just as many precincts as they have for the co-response model, because I believe that this could literally save lives. We need to literally save people's lives by investing investing in resources that improve the quality of life, that save the lives of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Witzel.
Hello, I'm Julie Nolan. I'm a professor at Vanderbilt. I'm here to speak on NOAA's behalf in favor of their moral budget, which includes fully funding the NPS budget, including 5.8 for advocacy centers and specialists in elementary schools to support social emotional learning. When I teach developmental psychology at Peabody, I walk students through a set of 10 principles that represent the overlap between neuroscience and developmental psychology. And it begins with firm foundations, recognizing that experience itself has a direct and critical effect on the architecture of the brain. And so it's a moral budget to fund social emotional learning so that we can build those firm foundations in the brains of the young people that are going to be the future of Nashville. Also, in those principles includes the idea of toxic stress. And we know because of the pandemic, there's been intense adversive childhood events that have gone unrecognized because children are not with their teachers who can bring them into support. And so we need to address this crisis, fully funding these advocacy centers and specialists for social emotional learning in our schools to deal with this toxic stress that is destroying the brains of young children if they're not adequately supported. So that, in addition to the restorative practice assistants in the high schools and middle schools. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nolan. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Wood. I live at 4711 Utah Avenue in Sylvan Park, where my husband and I have owned a home for the past 21 years. I am in opposition to the proposed operating budget, in large part because it doesn't fully fund NOAA's moral budget priorities or what you've been hearing from the People's Budget Coalition, which I also support. Many people have spoken quite eloquently on these things. I'm just going to touch on something that's close to home for me personally, because that's where my head is at right now. And I'm saying this recognizing that I am a woman of relative privilege, not only in terms of my skin color, my race, but also in terms of my relative income. Come to find out, we are cost burdened. And we are seriously doubting on our housing. We're seriously doubting that we can afford to stay in our home any longer and probably won't be able to stay in Nashville. That hurts my heart, but what hurts my heart even more is to think of the people who are even more cost burdened on their housing and of the people who don't have housing. That is a really sobering thought to think if someone like me is struggling. Imagine what's happening to other people. And I think what's in NOAA's moral budget regarding housing is barely enough of a start. There are so many more things that need to be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Next speaker.
Greetings, Metro Council. My name is Amanda Kale, and I am also an MNPS teacher and president of the Metro Nashville Education Association. First and foremost, I want to say that teachers across Nashville are thrilled to see the proposed investment in MNPS. In previous years, thousands of MNPS students went without a teacher in at least one subject, and by funding the mayor's teacher compensation study, we will be moving much closer to making sure that every student has a certified teacher in every classroom. But educators also understand that our students are impacted by what happens outside of school. Poverty and homelessness and violence are all too common realities for far too many of the families that we serve. To that end, we also applaud the $25.5 million investment in WeGo. That means that more families will have transportation. As a teacher who has seen families go homeless because their car broke down and the family couldn't get to work, this is a good thing. But there are, this is the first, there's some good first steps being made here towards creating a Nashville that works for all. But if we're ready to go beyond those first steps, and I urge you to, consider funding some of the following. We do need increased funding for affordable housing. With a rocketing real estate market, many of our families are being priced out. We join NOAA in that ask of making sure that our families have access to that. We also join them in asking for funding for a mental health program to answer 911 calls without the police, the HEALS program, and support Gideon's Army's violence interruption program. We see this being an extremely positive thing in our schools. We want to make sure also that all of Nashville's public employees, not just teachers, are able to be the best paid in our state and ensure a step and COLA are funded every year so we don't run the same problem of low wages and stagnation for years. We recognize this is not necessarily feasible all in 1 year, but it's a good start in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dwana Wade in Whites Creek. While I'm here representing NOAA, as I co-chair the Social Emotional Learning Subcommittee of the Education Task Force, I stand in solidarity with the other organizations and community members you've heard from today. Gideon's Army, the People's Budget Coalition, SEIU, and so many others who represent the very real needs of our community members. It should not be lost on any of you that we are all here today and that we've been meeting, calling, emailing, speaking, organizing for the basic needs of our community for way too long. All of the issues we're talking about are connected, and we've elected you to make sure a moral budget is developed and implemented for all Nashvillians, primarily those who have been left out, pushed out, and whose patience is maxed out. Thank you to those of you who have regularly and consistently mentioned, questioned, and advocated for full funding for SEL in the current budget. It's simply not enough as written. At least $7.8 million is needed to fund supports in every single elementary, middle, and high school in MNPS. We know you have tough decisions to make. We all make those same kinds of decisions in our personal budgets. We make those decisions based upon basic needs as basic rights. We expect you to do the same. Fund a moral budget that prioritizes education, housing, healthcare, and jobs, not police. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Anna Hodges, and the people of Nashville deserve to have a school system to be proud of that gives all children a true shot at success. MNPS requests $5.8 million for advocacy centers and specialists in all elementary schools and $2 million for restorative practice assistants in all middle and high schools. We want sustained funding for SEL as a foundation that will become a backbone in a stable environment for learning, and I ask you to grant this request. I'm a volunteer in NOAA's Educational Task Force, and specifically on the subcommittee for social emotional learning and restorative practices. I don't have children, but I live and pay taxes here, and I care a lot about our public school system. I would like to share a personal story that illustrates why it's so important to me. My father struggled with dyslexia and ADHD growing up, and he was treated very poorly in school and at home. And at the time, people didn't understand his struggle. He dropped out of school in the 8th grade, and he struggled there on out, battling addiction, feeling lost and distrust in others because he didn't understand how to build and maintain relationships on a personal and professional level, and it ultimately led him taking his own life. All I can think of is how the investment in SEL for our children will produce better adults and give them the skills needed to navigate their lives, and plain and simple. If we had something like this when my father was in school, would he have felt more empowered today? We know a lot more today about social and emotional health than we did a decade ago. What I still hear are circumstances that our teachers do not have the resources they need to provide adequate and safe spaces for students who struggle with anxiety, stress, and other learning differences.
Good evening. My name is Vanessa Robertson Sanders. I support the mayor's budget, and I'm delighted that he understands the hard work and the commitment that the workers put in every day at Nashville General Hospital. It wasn't easy, though, going through a pandemic. However, we stood strong, and we weathered the storm, and we remain even more committed to the community and the city that we serve. Please continue supporting one of the best healthcare facilities here in Nashville. Thank you, Mayor, for fully funding Nashville General Hospital we are continuing to do amazing things. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Steve Vinnick. I'm here today on behalf of the NOAA Affordable Housing Task Force, the People's Budget, Gideon's Army, all the groups that we've heard from before who are really here to just tell you what we need to succeed and thrive as a community. I support the $1 million in funding to expand the Gideon's Army violence interruption program. I support the $5.8 million for SEL. I support the restoring WeGo's funding and the funding for a much-needed transportation department, but I cannot support the mayor's budget as it currently stands because there is not enough investment in affordable housing. We need the same kind of investment in affordable housing that we are seeing this year for the first time in transportation. We need a Department of Housing. The mayor's budget includes 2 individuals, which is a small step in the right direction in the planning department, but you can't put out a fire with, just a pail of water. We need a plan. We need a plan. We need long-term investment. I also work at the Tornado Recovery Connection and now the Disaster Recovery Connection responding to the flood with Rachel Turnez, who was speaking earlier. This is a crisis. I know you all hear it, but maybe you're not down in the trenches seeing it every day. The people that were affected by the disasters, there's nowhere to go. I'm still working with clients who, from the tornado, 14 months ago, who I still can't find a place for them to live. They've applied to 2 or 3 or 4 MDHA properties. The wait list is a year or 18 months long. There is no place for these people to go, and we have to do something as a city that's gonna finally say, we care about this, we care about affordable housing. We're not gonna be the same Nashville that we all know and love if you can only afford to live here if you're working at Oracle and making $100,000 a year. So please invest in affordable housing. We need a department, we need a long-term plan, and we need at least $30 million in the Barnes Fund. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vinnick. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Martha Carroll. Thank you, members of Metro Council. People and nations become what they tolerate and not what they preach. An anonymous quote. What are we as Nashvillians going to tolerate? Are we going to tolerate people, including families with children living in tents, cars, motel rooms, single moms working 2 or 3 jobs just to make it, moderate to low income people being forced to move out of Nashville to make way for better, more expensive housing? Our housing crisis is fixable, but only if we, number 1, make it a priority, 2, fund it adequately, and 3, make it last. I'm thankful for a budget that begins to address some of this and very frustrated that it's not enough. We're already the best southern city in so many ways, in the best state according to today's Tennessean. Happy birthday, Tennessee. But what if we made the decision now? No more. We are not going to tolerate children living in anything less than a safe, affordable house or apartment. We are not going to tolerate anything less than an ongoing, fully funded, separate Office of Affordable Housing. We are not going to tolerate less than enough, minimum 31,000 affordable units. Why would we tolerate allowing this unique, beautiful, artistic city to become one more city defined predominantly by industrial expansion and a proliferation of commercial properties at the very expense of the things we love the most about Nashville, our truly diverse, musical, artistic, funky city? You, our elected representatives, have to make it happen. The people of NOAA and so many other groups stand behind you as you go about this difficult task, but do it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dominique Anderson. I am the Executive Director for the Tennessee Affordable Housing Coalition, and I do this work because my grandfather, Sells Finest Peaks, built a lot of the city that is now gone to be the IT city. I'm here to ask that I literally drove in off the street from Memphis, to Nashville, and was asked to be here to ask for more money in the Barnes Fund, so from 10 to 30 million, to create an office outside of the mayor's office so that it lives in perpetuity. right? So that people can continue to do the work and don't have to start over with each new mayor. And then I have to say, para mis gentes, tienen derechos aquí en los Estados Unidos, especialmente en Nashville. Juntos puede ganar. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you.